Today's episode of the Life in Attleboro podcast is proudly presented by Confidence Fitness. If there's one thing in life that we have at least a little control over, it's our health, what we decide to eat, and how much we decide to move our bodies. That's why I'm excited about this exclusive offer just for listening to the Life in Attleboro podcast. Confidence Fitness is offering a 2-week jumpstart program for just $99. It includes 6 small group personal training sessions so you can start building strength and muscle. You'll also receive their food and mood journal to get you thinking about what foods to eat and how they impact your body and mind. And you'll also get an in-body scan to measure your current body composition. All you have to do is go to lifeinattleboro.com and you'll see the link right there on our homepage. I'll also include the link in the show notes of this episode. Confidence Fitness is located at 453 South Main Street. Confidence Fitness. Strength for life, strength for sports. And now, on to the show. You are listening to the Life in Attleboro podcast, where we interview the city's most interesting people who are making a positive difference in our community. Hey everyone, I'm the host of the Life in Attleboro podcast, Mike Sullivan. Bliss Dairy. It's one of my favorite restaurants in the city. I love the food, I love the ice cream, and I love the history behind the business. I recently sat down with Dave Bliss, who owned the restaurant for many years. His grandfather actually started it all, back in the roaring 20s. Enjoy episode 18 of the Life in Attleboro podcast. Today, I am very excited to speak with Dave Bliss, whose family first opened this city staple back in 1929. In fact, the restaurant and company just celebrated its 95th anniversary, so congrats on that. Dave, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life in Attleboro podcast.
You're welcome. Glad to be with you.
I appreciate it. So I want to start from the very beginning because, as a lot of people know by now, I'm a huge history dork. So can you tell us how this all started? I understand it was your grandparents who started it, and it wasn't a restaurant to begin.
No, my grandfather was in the jewelry business, actually, and I'm not sure exactly how he came about starting the milk plant on Park Street in Attleboro, but that happened in the late 20s, 27, 28, 29, somewhere around there. The exact date is unknown. But he purchased milk from his brothers, and they had the property down in Agricultural Avenue, the old family homestead, which actually the company still owns the majority of. And they, at some point, I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but there was an old wooden milk plant out behind the house at, I think it's 697 Park Street or something like that, right next door to the restaurant and present plant. And shortly thereafter, at that time, they were delivering milk by horse and buggy and motorized vehicles. My father always tells the tales, and I'm not sure how true this is, but they used to deliver milk by a horse with a wagon, and the driver would hop out and go to a house, and the horse would know the route well enough to know that it needs to be turned around. So the horse would go down the end of the street, turn around, and wait for the driver to get back in and continue the route. Shortly after starting the company, they started making ice cream and sold it at a little tiny ice cream stand. If you were facing with the present day warehouses with the big cows on it, to the right a little bit in the front was a small, about 20 or 25 by 25 ice cream stand where they sold it in the good weather. In the wintertime, they used to actually sell ice cream out of the house. The house operated as a family house and the office. And they had an ice cream cabinet in there to serve customers in the wintertime. So it really all started there in the milk business and then branched out into a little bit of ice cream, sold out of one little ice cream stand.
So it does not get more authentic than that. I love that. The horse and buggy, even knowing the route. Come on, that so genuine, so wholesome. That's awesome. Your grandparents eventually turned the company over to your father. Is that right?
Yeah, that probably officially happened sometime around 1960 to 65, something like that.
Okay, so what was it like to, have a father who was a busy company owner? What vivid memories do you have with your grandparents and your father growing up in that kind of atmosphere?
The interesting thing is we lived right in the area. We lived at the end of East Street, which dead ends in the back of the plant. And so we were over there all the time. I remember as a kid, the so-called janitor of the company was a guy by the name of Charlie Tuttle, and he worked in the cooler and also did general maintenance. And he would pay us 10 cents to go up and down the lane We called it the lane next to the pond that's presently there. It was there at the time as well, to pick up trash and papers and stuff like that. And we'd take that 10 cents and buy an ice cream cone with it. This was probably back around 1960-ish, something like that. So we were always around the business because we lived basically right there.
So is that how much it cost for an ice cream cone? 10 cents back in the 60s?
It was either 5 cents or 10 cents. I think it was 10 cents when I was about 7, 8 years old, something like that.
And at that point, it was still just milk and ice cream, right?
Yes. What I recall, I don't really recall the old ice cream stand. I do remember the old wooden ice cream milk plant. I remember one time we used to, as kids, play around in the area and in the buildings and so forth. And we went in and hopped up on some boxes up behind where the tank truck would pull in. And the driver pulled in and we skedaddled up these pile of boxes and he closed the door and we couldn't get out.
Oh,
I don't remember how we eventually did get out, but we were messing around all the time and talking to the people. I also remember going into the office, probably 12, 13 years old, and asking the ladies working the office for the coins that the drivers would turn in. And we were collecting coins and trying to get every year dimes and pennies and so forth. So we go through and bother them for all their coins. So like I said, it was kind of family being over there as well as being at home.
That's so cool. It wasn't cold in the place that you got trapped in, was it? Okay,
no,
good. That would have been scary. So probably a lot of screaming, get us out.
Yes.
That's funny. So when did you and your wife take over the company?
I started in the business right out of college.
Okay.
My wife at the time was working downtown for I think at the time it was called the First National Bank. And she started working in the business full time when our kids, around 1990-ish or so, when our kids were in school and she could spend more time away from taking care of them during the middle of the day. So I think probably around the middle 90s, this is as low key as you get in terms of running a business. My father said to me one day, David, we're going to have a meeting of the stockholders and you're president now. And that was it. And I think I'm not sure at the time, but I think my wife was working with us. And she ended up basically running the office, taking care of almost everything from accounts payable to talking to customers. We did a lot of phone calling for customer orders, particularly from 1990 on and so forth. Most of our orders were taken over the phone for milk delivery and also for ice cream deliveries. So it was a lot of customer contact on the phone.
Gotcha. So when you took over, was the restaurant in existence yet?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. When did the restaurant start?
They started selling. My father had the idea or got the idea from Friendly's, basically, and a couple of others, Newport Creamery in Rhode Island, that if you're in the ice cream business, maybe it makes sense to be a little bit more in the sandwich and ice cream shop business. So they took the ice cream stand, which at the time was in the front of, it's basically where the windows are now. The new company installed the windows back again, about where they were way back when. But around 1950 to 1951, my grandparents and grandfather decided to build a replacement plant where it presently sits now. And it was about a 100 by 100 building. And in the front of it was the ice cream stand. My father bumped out the front of the building to accommodate horseshoes, if you would, like a Friendly's and like our store is now, and put a grill in. It still kept the windows and walk-in service to get ice cream cones, but also served sandwiches, burgers, and probably pretty much what we do now. We probably sell a little bit more variety than we did back then. But it was I think that was around 1963 or so, that the ice cream stand was turned into a restaurant. And then the present restaurant was added on during the year of 1977. And we had the fortunate blizzard that came along in the February of 1978 that everybody remembers. You wouldn't, but everybody our age remembers. And we opened about a week before that blizzard. So it was an interesting time.
So what is it like to run such a successful restaurant and company? Some of the good times, I'm sure stressful at times, some of the bad times, any memories or experiences that you'll never forget? I'm sure you have tons of them, but any that stick out, good, bad, ugly, great?
Fortunately, most of the time I remember the good times.
Good.
I was working with the employees that we had long-term employees, 40, 45 years.
Wow.
That worked for us, and several of them. So you remember and you miss the employees more than anything else. The bad times, I'm not really, they don't really stand out as much now.
Good.
But yeah, it was just an interesting dynamic, if you would. Interesting dynamic working with your father. My brother-in-law worked for us as well, and my wife. So it was a true family business.
I was just going to say, even today, you walk in, it's, again, one of my favorite places in the city. You walk in, you feel like family. I know that you sold the restaurant back in 2015, but that continues. The name is still there. The family feeling is still there. So that's still authentic and great. It is important to note here, New England Ice Cream currently owns Bliss Dairy. Dave, you sold the restaurant back in 2015. I got to ask you why.
I was getting up in age, early 60s, and we had really no intention of looking for a way out, if you would. My two children, one was actually working for us. She was a teacher, but disenchanted with teaching and came to work for us for a few years and liked it. I talked to her every once in a while about, what do you think about the future? And most of the time, or all the time, she'd say, I like working here. I love working with you and Mom, but I don't want to run it. My son is a mechanical engineer. And at the time when we sold, he was and still is working for Exxon and lives in Houston. And I remember talking to him. My wife and I came to the agreement that we'll give them 10 years out of college to make sure they know what they're doing and what they're doing before we do anything with the business. And the 10 years or so was up. And so we would talk to them frequently. My son, I always remember my son, because he used to work in the business as well, mostly as a high schooler and college kid in the summers, working in the ice cream room. But he would always say, Dad, I wouldn't mind making ice cream machines, but I don't think I really want to make ice cream for a living. So we knew the continuation wasn't with our two children. And their cousins and so forth were off doing other things as well. So when Bruce Ginsburg from New England Ice Cream approached us, we started to pay more attention. And he had talked to me a few years before we actually sold. And gradually got to a point of, let's have more of a conversation. But it was a question of, where do we go beyond this with the family business? At some point, it's got to change, or I don't know. Yeah.
Congrats on having two highly successful children. Sounds like they're doing very well. Absolutely.
They're very well situated.
So how often do you still live in Attleboro? You're very involved in the community. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but how often do you go to Bliss?
We probably eat there not any more than once a month, once every few weeks.
Nice.
I got to go there today to get some ice cream.
There you go.
To bring home. But yeah, we're there frequently. I was talking about long-term employees, and you mentioned that it still seems like a family operation when you go in. Mike Nuttall is a guy, I was going to say kid. He's been working for them and us for over 30 years, I believe, at least. And he started in that store we had in Taunton back as a high school person, and he's been running the store since well before we sold it, and is continuing there now. So it has the same vibe, and part of that's because of him.
I would agree. So when you go there, what's your favorite meal? Do you get the same thing every time, or do you mix it up?
We're so old, we share lunches now.
Okay.
So my wife and I will either have a grilled cheese and tuna or a Bliss special. Okay. A Bliss special. Talk about prices. I remember seeing some of the old menus that I have here at the house of a Bliss special, which I don't know if it's getting close to $10 now. Yeah. But when we first started making that, I think it was 55 cents.
Oh my goodness.
So it's incredible looking back at the history of when the restaurant really started.
Yeah. And again, just an amazing family legacy. So congrats to you and all of your family members. What about ice cream? What's your favorite ice cream flavor?
I'll be very boring. Chocolate.
Okay. A classic staple. I'm right there with you, Dave. Thank you for sharing all of this. I really appreciate you. This is a very special story, so thank you. Is there anything else that you haven't touched on that you would like the people of Attleboro to know about what it was like to own Bliss Dairy for so long, for all those years?
Oh, gosh. It was great working with the community. We tried to, my father was very active in community projects and organizations. I tried to continue that as well. My father was very involved with the bank, Attleboro Trust Company at the time, which now is no longer. It's been merged with other banks, the YMCA board, and so on. And I've tried to keep with some of that history with doing other things in the community as well. And my wife is very involved with the fundraising. She works for the does work with the Y for a couple of fundraisers, and she just got done last week. I think actually you probably talked to them over the Empty Bowls project.
Yeah.
She's one of the 5 people that put that together every year.
Oh, wow.
So she's very active as well.
That's great. Yeah, I went to the Empty Bowls event last weekend, and there was another smashing success despite a few raindrops. And Dave, I had the honor of speaking at the Rotary Club. I was invited to speak there just about the podcast and why it all started. And I had the pleasure of meeting you there. So can you tell us quickly about how else you are involved? I know you're a big part of the community. You touched on it, but Rotary Club, what kind of things do they do? Anything you'd like to share?
The Rotary Club attempts to fundraise to give money back to the community. The big fundraiser is we used to call it the radio auction, but now it's all computerized and online. It went from a radio auction to a TV and radio auction to a completely online auction now. We used to park cars for the Patriots games, but the facility that we're doing that changed hands. But they give back to the community in many ways with soup kitchens also and that kind of thing. I joined Rotary, I guess I was in my early 30s. I was a president back in 1991, I believe. It's a great organization, and you meet a lot of nice people that are also interested in doing things for the community.
Yeah, so many great people doing great things. You are certainly one of them, Dave. So Dave Bliss, former owner of Bliss Dairy, thank you so much for being a guest and sharing all of those beautiful stories with us. I really appreciate it, sir.
You're welcome. It was fun.
I really hope you enjoyed our conversation with Mr. Bliss. What a great guy who continues to help our community in so many ways. If you're enjoying the Life in Attleboro podcast, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. I'd really appreciate it. Also, make sure you're signed up for our email list. That's where you're going to get exclusive benefits, including early access to every new podcast episode, special savings at Attleboro restaurants and businesses, and you'll stay in the know about cool events in our great city. Just go to lifeinattleboro.com and you'll see the sign-up display right there on the homepage. And if you know someone who would make a great guest on our podcast, please shoot us an email at lifeinattleboro@gmail.com. Life in Attleboro is a great thing. Support our community, promote positivity, and make a stranger smile. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Life in Attleboro podcast.